This is Steffen Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. We're here at the Iowa State University bookstore and going to talk a little bit about our most pressing international problem, which at this moment seems to be the situation in Egypt and more broadly in the Middle East. Of course, President Mubarak has left. A surprise departure. He couldn't hang on to power because he was the symbol of essentially an oppressive government, a semi-dictatorship, a government that had elections that were fake, and a government that did not promote the economic prosperity or the political freedom of the majority of people. I talked with an Egyptian today, actually, and we went back and forth on what the current situation is, which is that the military, of course, essentially has taken over the country, taken over the management of the country, has issued military decrees, changing some of the laws, suspending the Constitution, and so on. And I said, that's the way I was hoping it would go. My own view was that you could not have democracy all of a sudden occur overnight, even with Mubarak gone, because the institutions aren't there to have a civilian government. Their political parties are not well organized. The opposition is very weak. And if you had elections immediately, it would be, I think, very chaotic. So my own idea was that the military should come in, take over, stabilize the situation, and then implement reforms over the coming 6 months or so, and give the civilians a chance to get themselves organized, and then with some international assistance hold elections for a new government. My Egyptian friend said, oh no, he said, these are the same people that were in power when Mubarak was in power, and it's basically now a military dictatorship. And I'm very afraid, he said, that they will simply continue in power and that they will not move on, and make the transition to a civilian government. We should have had immediately a civilian government appointed and held elections right away. And so those are the two different points of view. Go immediately to a civilian government of some sort, or let the military act as a stabilizing force to make the transition. I still think I'm right. I still think that you can draw an analogy with Iraq, where after Saddam Hussein was removed from office by the U.S. military occupation, if we had allowed the Iraqi military and other Iraqi government bureaucracies to remain in place, they were, there with Saddam Hussein, but they were the only people who knew how to run the country. And we basically dismantled all of that. We fired all the people in the government who had been supporters of Saddam Hussein. The Iraqi military was disbanded, and what that led to was absolute chaos. The military took with them enormous amounts of weapons and military materiel, which is still being used now to make improvised explosive devices. The power plants, sewage treatment plants, electric generating facilities, all of them basically collapsed because the people who worked there were fired. And I think we made a huge strategic mistake in Iraq by not allowing the leftovers of the previous government to help move the country to the next and more democratic kind of political system. And I think in Egypt, all of this is a giant challenge anyway, because I was saying to someone just earlier that Egypt really never has had a civilian democratic government. Going all the way back to the pharaohs and before the pharaohs, Egypt has had authoritarian governments, monarchies, and dictators throughout its entire history. So the transition to democracy, I think, has to come at least as slowly as 6 months, which would be remarkably short anyway. And I'm very hopeful that the military in Egypt has the wisdom and foresight to understand that if they don't do that, then you will really have a revolution in the country, a revolution that will dismantle everything that the military itself cares for and thinks is important. So let's see if I'm right. We'll talk about this again in 6 months. This is Steffen Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com.